When I pastored in Indianapolis, sometimes when I would meet somebody and invite them to church, they would say, "Is your church part of a denomination?" And at that time, our church was not part of a denomination. It was an independent church. And I would tell them that. And it seemed that people were always glad to hear that our church was just an individual church, just a local church, and not part of a denomination. And many people today don't like denominations. They don't like the idea of it. They think that it is an institution that dominates local people and tells them what to believe, dominates the local church. And so in this lesson, I want us to talk about church associations, and some of them would be called denominations. And I want to talk about the reason they exist, the purposes of them, and let you think about what is good, what might be difficult about a denomination. And so think about the church that you are in. Maybe you're in an individual church that's independent, that is not part of any group. Maybe you are part of a denomination. And as we go through this lesson, you can think about what that fact means to you. Now, when we talked about doctrinal stability earlier in a previous lesson, we talked about three things that a local church needs in order to have doctrinal stability. And the first one is that a church should believe in the absolute authority of the Bible. And so their beliefs should be based on the Bible. Their beliefs can be tested by the Bible, and they never consciously and purposely, at least, believe something that is contrary to the authority of the Bible. Secondly, they hold the essential doctrines of historic Christianity. That means they believe what the first Christians believed, what the apostles taught, and those first few generations of Christians when they established doctrinal statements expressing what real Christianity is. Now, this is a balance to the first point. Because if a person says, well, I believe the Bible, I'm just going to believe the Bible, I don't care what anybody else says, but he also comes up with beliefs that contradict the first generations of Christianity, then he's going wrong. His church is not right, if that's the direction his church is going. His church needs to be staying true to those original doctrines established in Christianity. And then a third feature of doctrinal stability, or a third factor that helps a church have doctrinal stability, is to have fellowship in an association of churches. Now, that might be something that's very structured like a denomination. It might be less structured, and they may say what we have is not a denomination, just an association. But a believer likes to know that he is in something that is broader than just the local group. He likes to know that he is part of something, that there's this fellowship that is beyond just the people that he meets with on Sunday. A definition of a church association is here. A church association is a group of churches that has central leadership, shared beliefs, shared goals, and fellowship. And so there is some kind of central headquarters or a leader. Now, how much control he has varies. Not all organizations are the same. Sometimes it's very little control that the head office has. They have shared beliefs, and this is a statement of doctrine. Every group has a statement of doctrine, and some have a very extensive statement of doctrine with lots of details, and including details of Christian practice. Others have a very short list, but this is the basis of their fellowship, that they share together these beliefs, and then also that they have goals. And so they may work together to send missionaries, they may work together to plant new churches, they may have conventions, but they have shared goals. They work together. And then fellowship. And this usually is in the form of events where they come together for a convention, times when they share together, times when they network in other ways. And so that's what a church association is. It's a group of local churches that are connected to have central leadership, shared beliefs, shared goals, and fellowship. Now, associations come with some variety, and we could divide them into the categories of weak associations or strong associations. Now, when we say weak, we don't necessarily mean that as a criticism. It just means that that group of churches has decided that the central leadership should not have a lot of control over the local churches. And so they do not want strong central leadership. Whereas in a strong organization, a strong association, they emphasize the central authority. They have a bishop or somebody who has strong authority over the local churches. So when the church association is what we could call weak, that means that the local authority is strong. That means each local church has a lot of authority for itself, and that the central authority does not dominate the local church. And so the points there, central leaders do not control the local church. The local leaders are in charge there. Secondly, it's a short list of common beliefs and policies. There are not many pages of beliefs that the local church is expected to hold. Instead, it will be a much shorter list. And then number 3, voluntary participation in goals. And so when this association says, we're going to send a missionary to this place, or we're going to start a church over here, or we want to build a convention center, the churches respond voluntarily. And if churches do not choose to respond, they're not forced to, because the central authority does not control them. And so their participation in the goals is voluntary. And so there may be some local churches in the association that do a lot. They're involved all the time. There are others that may almost do nothing in participation with the group. And then number 4, infrequent fellowship. So they may get together for some things, but it's not quite as structured and it's not quite as required. So in these cases, sometimes in these weaker associations where the central authority is not strong and not emphasized, sometimes local pastors may be very strong. And the churches, there may be strong churches with strong pastors that are very influential, and it would almost be hard to imagine a bishop or somebody coming in there and exerting authority over that church, because the church is strong and the central organization is not. So what is a strong association? In a strong association, the local authority is weaker, and so the pastor of the local church has somewhat less authority. And in the strong association, central leadership can overrule local leaders, at least in some situations. If there is a problem, the central leadership may come in and tell the local church what they have to do. Secondly, there is a longer list of beliefs and policies, and it's important that the church follow these. A church can be disciplined or even be removed from the fellowship if they if they fail to follow the common beliefs. Number 3, local churches are expected to financially support, and this is close to being a requirement. They're expected to do their share. And then number 4, scheduled contact for fellowship, whether conventions or whatever, but it's more structured and churches are more likely to be involved. And then number 5, the local property may even be owned by the association rather than being owned by the local church. And so these are all signs of a strong association. Now, various kinds of associations exist, and so there would be organizations that would not fit exactly either this list or the other list. They would be somewhere in between. The closer they are to the description of the weak association, the more of a weak association they are. The closer they are to fit this description, the stronger the association is. And a strong association would be one that is often called a denomination. Some of those weaker associations, they would not be denominations. They would like the word, and they would emphasize very strongly that every church is autonomous Every church is its own final authority and is voluntarily a member of the association, and they like the idea of denominations. So there is a lot of debate about what it ought to be, whether denominations even should exist, what the authority of the local church should be. Now, let's talk about the purposes of an association. And in some cases, again, this may be a denomination that's highly organized. But before we decide whether a denomination is good or not, let's look at the reasons that it exists. And I'm going to give you a list of purposes that are fulfilled by an association or a denomination of churches. First of all, it provides a sense of identity. And so the local church and the people of that church can feel that they are a part of something bigger. And so they may all have the same name, and it's on the same name is on the sign of each of those churches in all of their locations. Secondly, it establishes doctrine, and this helps protect the local church in case there would be people there that would decide to come up with strange new doctrines or go to a different direction. The fact that they're part of an organization helps keep them in unity on that. Third, the denomination sets qualifications for members and pastors. And so the requirement, if you're going to be a member of one of those churches, if you move from one church to another, the requirements will be the same. And it helps maintain consistency. The requirements for pastors or for ordination, it helps set those. Many times independent churches, it's difficult for them to decide how a pastor can be ordained or what the qualifications should be. Number 4, a system of church administration. The denomination will give directions on how the local church board should be formed and how they should function. Number 5, a means of training pastors. Now, not all denominations do well at this, but this is a goal that they have. Some of them establish their own institute or a course of study of some kind because they want to be able to train the pastors who will pastor churches in the future. They guide the placement of pastors. And this is a good advantage of being in a denomination because sometimes if a pastor feels that he should leave his place of ministry, that God is calling him to move on, to go somewhere else, it helps to be part of an organization that helps to facilitate that. So he can call the central leadership and they can tell him about other churches that are in need of a pastor, and they can help guide that process. Similarly, the denomination can help the church. If a pastor resigns and leaves, or maybe he has gotten into some kind of trouble and the church even has removed their pastor for some reason, the denomination can step in and help recommend and help replace that pastor and make sure the church does not go without leadership for a long period of time. Number 7, guidance during local church problems. And so if a church gets into some division and some struggles, maybe even legal problems or doctrinal debates or whatever, it helps to have leaders that can come in and help mediate and help settle, work through those local problems. Number 8, mission work and church planting. Many local churches are not financially able to send a missionary and support a missionary on their own. They are not able to start another church, or at least they don't feel able to do that. And sometimes there are small churches that they would like to be involved in mission work. They would like to help start new churches, but they don't know how to do that on their own. But when they partner together with other churches in an association or in the form of a denomination, then together they can send a missionary or they can start a church in another place. Number 9, fellowship larger than the local church. And this is similar to having an identity that is beyond, but they get together, they can encourage each other, they can share their experiences and help each other make progress. Number 10, they have events that bring the churches together. And so these things can be encouraging. They can be revival events. They can be rallies. They can be training times, encouraging times, whatever. But events that bring the churches together. And they're coming together with churches that believe the same thing they do, have the same policies that they do. And so that can be an encouragement to them. Number 11, the central leadership visits for encouragement. And so the bishop or the conference president or whatever he is called in that group, he makes regular visits to those churches to encourage and to help them, let them know that somebody cares about them. And then number 12, giving counsel for local financial sustainability. And so every church should be growing towards being able to sustain itself financially, and this is an important role. Especially this applies to newer churches, churches that were planted by the denomination or planted by a pastor who went a place to start something. And so somebody can help counsel them and encourage them to help develop the church to where it becomes locally sustained. So if a denomination does well at serving all of these purposes, it can be a valuable help for accomplishing the purposes of the church. And it would be very difficult for many local churches to accomplish all of these purposes operating completely alone. Now, we talked about what the denomination does for the local churches. Let's talk about what the churches owe to the denomination. If a church is going to commit to be part of a denomination, what is it that the denomination should be able to expect from them? First of all, that they accept and teach the common doctrines. And so whatever the statement, and it may be a long statement or it may be short, it may require a lot of detail or it may not, but whatever is required, whatever that church has agreed to, they should not teach something that is contrary to that. They should not allow a preacher to come in and preach something that is contrary to what they have agreed on together. Secondly, teach and require consistent Christian living. And so the denomination or the association, they have agreed together about what Christian living should look like. And that may be very detailed or it may be very brief. But what it means to be a Christian in the world, living in a way that is pleasing to God, there's some details to that. And the local church, their practice, their teachings should be consistent with that. Number 3, participate in association events. And it's not really fair if a church says, well, I'm part of a denomination, and they gain the benefits of that, but they never participate, they never go to the conventions, they never get together, and they never financially support. They really have some obligation to do that. Number 4, there is some reporting that is involved. And so requirements are not the same for every organization, but usually it includes reporting the local church attendance, giving some report about their staffing and about their finances. Keeping unity with other churches. And so sometimes, unfortunately, there can be some disagreement, there can be some division. Someone can be unhappy about what another church is doing, and it's important for the churches to work through these issues in a Christian way and to be able to maintain unity. There should never be that a local church of one that's in a denomination would refuse to fellowship with people from another church of that denomination. They should maintain unity. Number 6, they should not commit to any other organization in a way that would conflict. And so it would be impossible usually for them to be members of more than one denomination. There may be other kinds of organizations that they can share in, like some kind of local fellowship group or something like that, but they should not commit to anything else in a way that would conflict with the commitment they have to their association. Sometimes one of the challenges of developing the association is on a mission field where missionaries have gone, usually foreign missionaries. They go in, they evangelize, churches are started. There usually is some financial support and leadership that is provided by these foreign leaders. But over time, the churches in that country should become strong. They should become more locally directed and locally supported. And so there is a transition that happens in that process. And sometimes this can be difficult. Sometimes the mission work has created some dependency and created some expectation that this financial support should go on forever, and that only missionaries can start new churches, not the pastors, the national pastors in the country. And so it's important that this be started right, for one thing, but then whatever mistakes have been made, that the group work towards establishing local leaders, local pastors who take responsibility for their churches, and then local bishops that take responsibility for serving those churches and pastors to where they are not dependent upon foreign support or foreign direction. We've talked a lot about what it means to be an association or a denomination. We talked about what the denomination does for the churches and what the churches owe to the denomination. The real priority is to make sure that the church is fulfilling the mission that God gave it. And I think if we understand the purpose of the association or denomination, that helps for us to be able to influence those that we're working with. But the purpose of the local church and the purpose of the denomination working together is to fulfill the mission that God has given His church on the earth.